The Department of World Languages and Cultures at Georgia State University presents Arabic 1001 Grammar. In this fourth part of the course, we discuss idafa or possession. In this lesson, we continue to discuss simple iḍāfas, and in this final section of the lesson, we discuss how to use them in phrases and sentences. We can look at our book and say, هذا كتاب, this is a book, or we can say, هذا كتاب الأستاذة, this is the book of the professor. Kitab al-Ustadha is our idafa here. Kitab looks indefinite, but is actually definite because it's owned by the professor. The professor is marked as definite, and we put the object possessed before its possessor. So we say, this is the book of the professor in Arabic, and this is the professor's book in English. Same thing with our page. هذه ورقة, this is a page. We can say هذه ورقة الطالب, this is the page of the student, where we hear the ta in ta marbuta on waraka, and therefore this is the student's page. In the last lesson, we learned to form iḍāfas. In this lesson, we're going to learn to use them in phrases and sentences. We can say هذا هو الكتاب, this is the book. We can say كتاب الأستاذة جميل, the book of the professor is beautiful. Kitab and al-Ustadha are both definite, Jamil is indefinite, so we get the professor's book is beautiful. In the page, we have هذه هي الورقة, this is her, the page. ورقة الطالب بيضاء, where we have ورقة الطالب are both definite, and بيضاء is indefinite, so the page of the student is white or blank, or the student's page is blank. When we use iḍāfas in phrases and sentences, we treat them as a single unit. The iḍāfa can be part of a phrase when used with adjectives. It can also be part of the subject or predicate of a sentence. However, it works quite a bit counterintuitively with phrases versus sentences. We can say, بيت الطالبة الجديدة. All three of these words are definite, and therefore this is a phrase, the new student's house. It is the student that is new here, not the house. However, if we make jadid indefinite, we create a sentence, Beit at-Taliba jadid, and therefore, because it's a sentence, jadid modifies the house, not the student. The student's house is new. This takes a lot of practice to get used to. And then lastly, we have هذه الفتاة أخت صديقي, this young woman is my friend's sister. All four words are definite here. هذه because it's a هذا word, al-fatat because of alif lam, Ukht because it's owned by Sadiqi, and Sadiqi because it has a possessive pronoun. However, turning it into a sentence is the only legitimate way to parse these words. Let's look at our backpack. حقيبة الطالب الجديد. All three words are definite here, so we know that this is a phrase, and therefore al-jadid modifies at-talib and not haqiba. This is easy to tell here because at-talib is masculine and so is jadid, whereas haqiba is feminine. So we get the new student's backpack. All these words are definite. It's a phrase. Sayyara tashab al-Lubnani, same thing here. All three words are definite. Sayyara because it's owned by ashab, and the other two because they have alif lam. So this is a phrase. The guy is Lebanese, not the car. We have the Lebanese guy's car here. When we use iḍāfas in phrases, we place the adjectives after the final noun. Because the final noun as well as the others are definite, the adjective needs to be definite as well, so it needs to have alif lam. In a phrase, not a sentence, placing an adjective after the iḍāfa modifies the final noun in the iḍāfa. So, Beit at-Taliba al-Jadida, the house of the student, the new, or the new student's house. Beit ukhti al-Latifa, the house of my sister, the nice, or my nice sister's house. Shawari' al-Madina al-Kabira, the streets of the city, the big, or the big city's streets. It is the city here that is big, not the streets. This is easily found via example. Haqibat al-Taliba al-Jadida, we've already seen the backpack of the student, the new, or the new student's backpack. We can do this with a masculine object as well. Bab al-Bayt al-Qadim. All three words are definite, the second two because they have alif lam, the first one because it's owned by al-Bayt. Therefore, Bab al-Bayt al-Qadim is a phrase, not a sentence. And we know that al-qadim modifies the last word in the idafa. It is the house here that is old, not the door. Now let's turn it around, and by taking away alif lam and ta marbuta, do something completely different. We can say haqibat at-talib jadida. Now we have definite, definite, indefinite, so we know that this is a sentence, not a phrase. The backpack of the student is new, or the student's backpack is new. Here, jadida modifies haqiba, not at-talib. We can look at this book and say kitab al-ustadha qadim, the book of the professor, old. Definite, definite, indefinite, so we know that this is a sentence. The book of the professor is old, and therefore the professor's book is old. When we use iḍāfas in sentences, we also place the adjectives after the final noun. Because the predicate of a sentence, however, is indefinite, we leave the alif lam off the adjective. In a sentence, not a phrase, to place an adjective after the idafa is to modify the first noun in the idafa, not the last noun like in a phrase. This is theoretically confusing, but pretty easy to work out via examples. Beit at-taliba jadid, the house of the student, new, or the house of the student is new, or the student's house is new. Beit ukhti saghir, the house of my sister, small, or my sister's house is small. Shawar al-Madina tawila, the streets, the city, long, or the city's streets are long. So in a phrase, everything is definite, and the following adjective modifies the last word in the idafa. In a sentence, the last adjective is indefinite, and it modifies the first word in the idafa. Again, theoretically confusing, but not difficult in practice. If we put full markings on these words, both haqiba and kitab get single dhammas. They're definite because they're owned, and they're in the marfu' case by default, so that's why we get a single dhamma. At-talib and al-ustadha both get single kasras. They're definite, and they're in the majrur case because they're non-first words in an idafa. But jadida and qadim get tanween ad-dam because now they're the predicate of the sentence. And again, by default, the predicate of the sentence is in the marfu' case. We compare haqibat at-taliba jadida, the student's backpack is new, up with a masculine object and say bab al-bayt qadim. If we put them in full form, haqibat and bab both get single dhammas because they're definite, because they're owned, and because they're first words in an idafa, they're by default in the marfu' case. At-taliba and al-bayt get single kasras because they're non-first words in an idafa and therefore in the majrur case, and they both have alif lam, so they're definite, whereas jadida and qadim both get tanween ad-dam, and the khabar of the sentence is by default in the marfu' case, and both of them are indefinite. Now let's do something more complicated and use the idafa in both a phrase and a sentence together. So haqibat at-talib al-jadid saghira jiddan. So haqibat at-talib is our idafa, the backpack of the student. Al-jadid is a following adjective that's definite. So together these three words make a phrase, and therefore the following adjective modifies the last word in the idafa. So the first three words are the backpack of the new student. But then saghira is indefinite, so that makes it the khabar or predicate of the sentence, and therefore it has to modify the first word in the idafa. So it modifies haqiba, not at-talib. So it's the backpack that's small here, not the student. And then just to remind you of how to use adverbs, we put them after their adjectives typically. So jiddan just stays jiddan. Adverbs don't change form or take alif lam. And therefore we get the backpack of the new student is small very, or the new student's backpack is very small. If we look at this car, we can say sayarat ash-shab al-lubnani kabira jiddan. So sayarat ash-shab, the car of the guy, followed by a definite adjective, al-Lubnani, Lebanese. That's part of a phrase, so it modifies the guy, not the car. But then the indefinite adjective kabira is the khabar or predicate of the sentence, and therefore it modifies the car, not the guy. And then again, jiddan is just jiddan. So the car of the Lebanese guy is big very, or the Lebanese guy's car is very big. If we put the full markings on, we can see that haqiba and sayara both get single dhammas for reasons we've explained before. At-talib and ashab both get single kasras because they're non-first words and definite. Also in ashab and al-lubnani, the kasra ought to go underneath the shadda instead of underneath the final letter, but I can't make PowerPoint do that in this edition. Al-Jadid modifies at-talib, so it has to agree with it. And then saghira and kabira are both the predicates of the sentence, and they're indefinite. The predicate of the sentence is by default in the marfu' case, and that's why they get tanween ad-dam. Jiddan, however, because it's an adverb, happens to be in the third of the three cases, the mansoob case, which is the one we haven't touched on yet, and we're not going to touch on it here. It's just there. Jiddan is just jiddan. When we use iḍāfas in phrases and sentences together, we can use it in a phrase as part of a sentence. The adjectives that go with the phrase are definite and modify the final word in the iḍāfa. The adjectives that make up the predicate of the sentence are indefinite and modify the first word in the iḍāfa. Again, that's weirdly confusing in theory, but pretty easy to deal with in practice. Bayt at-talib al-jadid qadim. Al-jadid modifies at-talib because it's definite. Qadim modifies bayt because it's the predicate of the sentence and therefore modifies the first word. Keep in mind that bayt here is definite because it's part of an iḍāfa, even though it doesn't look definite. Same thing in the second example. Shawari' al-Medina al-Kabira tawila. The streets of the city, the big, or the big city's streets, and then long, indefinite, making it are long. The trick to getting this is simply to do a lot of practice, and you'll get it pretty quickly, really. We can use iḍāfas in equational sentences and fronted predicate sentences. We can say, La yujad kutubun fi haqibati talibi. Now here, haqiba, the first word in the iḍāfa, gets a kasra, and the reason it gets a kasra is because it's no longer in the marfu' case by default, because it follows a preposition, and words that follow prepositions are always in the majrur case. Haqiba is in the majrur case because it follows a preposition. At-talib is in the majrur case because it's a non-first word in an iḍāfa. So, La yujad kutubun fi haqibati talibi means not found books in the backpack of the student, or there are no books in the student's backpack. We can also use the iḍāfa in a fronted predicate prepositional phrase sentence. We can say, Fi haqibati talibil jadidi, in the backpack of the new student. Al-kathiru min al-awraq. Al-kathiru min al-awraq is the subject or mubtada of the sentence here because we've put the prepositional phrase first. In the backpack of the student, the new, that is, in the backpack of the new student, we have many papers, or there are many pages in the new student's backpack. Using iḍāfas in phrases and sentences is kind of opaque theoretically. However, in practice, it's really not that difficult. So, of course, the trick is have a lot of practice.